Today we have a repeat performance, and our neighbor and guest is Chris Turner. And Chris Turner is back again from Afghanistan and agreed to come and give us an update. And I need to tell you that Chris has been, just a reminder, Chris has been in Afghanistan on and off since 1967. Yes. He speaks Pashtun, and he presently is a contractor for the Department of Defense, having worked for the CIA and the DEA and all kinds of alphabet soup, Chris. He got shot in 1985 by the Russians, and he came home and stayed 15 years. That was a long time to get that bullet wound healed.
Well, the trauma that went with it.
That's right, that's right. But he's been back now, what, 10 years?
Yes, ma'am.
10 years. I think, Chris, it might be a good idea to take a look at the map. Don't you think, before we start talking, so we can give you an idea of what we're talking about. And if you see to the south, you see Pakistan. To the east, or to the right as you face at India. Uzbekistan is to the north. And there is a pass from Afghanistan into China there. You can see that little finger up in your upper right-hand corner, or the northeast corner of the map. Correct? Is there anything else we should point out, Chris?
Well, the connection with Iran, you know, which is a major influence on whatever's happening there.
And Iran is, as you can see, to your left as you look, and look to your left and look up a little, and you'll see Iran.
Yeah.
In the south, there are the Pashtuns.
Yes, ma'am. The Pashtuns are a nomadic tribe, so they cover quite a bit of the country. The only other tribes that are influential are all up in the very northern part of the country, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, the Turkmens, and as you can see from the map, the Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, that's tribal. Tajikistan, those are the tribes that were kind of divided by the Russians in their conquest of that part of the world. But a large percentage of all those tribes are still in Afghanistan along that northern border.
And are those the tribes that Pakistan has put in the don't go there zone? What do they call it?
You know, those people have not been our enemies. They've traditionally been very supportive of the Americans. The Pashtus have been, or the Mujahideen/Taliban have been our real enemies.
And they're in the south.
They're in the south. They go along that eastern border of Pakistan. Pashtunistan was divided in half by the British when they segregated Pakistan and India. They did an agreement with one of the Afghan kings to lease the land for 100 years. That lease, I think, expired in 2002. But Pakistan's unwilling to give that property back.
Well, yes. And I know they noticed Kandahar down in the south.
And that's always been the capital of the Pashtu tribe.
Okay, now that we're oriented,
yes, ma'am.
I feel like a Boy Scout. Now that we have oriented ourselves,
yes.
You know, you said something to me which I thought was very interesting. When you're deciding to go back, you said it's very stressful. Why are you stressed now? You haven't been so stressed since 1967. Why now, even when you got shot?
Well, you know, we've really lost the hearts and minds of the people, you know, and I'm very sensitive to that, living with the Pashtus, and I literally live with them. You know, I'm not living in an American compound where I'm exposed to other Westerners all day. And they've been very disappointed in our effort there over the last 11 years. They feel like we really haven't accomplished what we intended to do. So that and the violence against them, you know, via this last case with Bales, really has an impact on their opinion of us. Karzai called us demons more recently.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of conversation is for the public consumption and not privately articulated?
But it reflects what he feels he needs to say because of public opinion.
Does he feel that way, do you think?
Well, I think he's a greedy, corrupt politician who's made $1 billion off this war and plans to leave as soon as we do.
With whatever else he can take.
Yeah.
Terrible, just terrible. You know, when we talked about it, you said to me, this is not a clean war. What did you mean by that?
Well, you know, I don't think any war is necessarily a clean war. You know, I think one of our biggest problems
Well, that's because it's war.
Yes.
But
and if we don't play by the same rules as our opposition, then it's not really a fair game. So they're using terror, it's literally their name, as a tool, and we don't do that. You know, we're not allowed to do that. And unfortunately, the American public needs to face this reality, swallow the pill that, you know, war's a dirty game. We need to go out and terrorize these people to really succeed. Highway 1, the major artery that connects the two major cities, Kandahar, the three major cities, Kandahar, Herat, Kabul, is being controlled, as far as my convoys of U.S. supplies, my trucks, is being controlled by a handful of Afghan fighters that work for a warlord. who's very connected to the Taliban. And we pay him, and the American government knows that. I went to Congress 2 years ago with my tribal leader and discussed it with Representative Tierney. And he wrote a report, and it had some impact, and the Army said, okay, we're going to outlaw this warlord, who we're now paying $1,500 per truck to take these supplies down Highway 1. We're going to outlaw him. So they did, and for 6 months he didn't operate. Well, he attacked us. He actually shut the highway down for 4 days, where no supplies were allowed to go south. So the Americans then said, okay, we concede that we have to use this gentleman. So they're now paying him $1,500 again. So this whole concept of turning security over to the Afghan fighting force is not realistic.
You don't think they're loyal?
Well, again, loyalty is in your heart. And if we don't have their heart, then we don't have loyalty. So no, they're not loyal to us at all. We're paying them. We not only supply them with weapons, we train them, we pay them every month. The Afghan government is bankrupt. They can't pay for this 250,000 soldiers that they plan to build their force to. So even though we leave, and the financial burden that we've been suffering under as a nation for 10 years is supposedly over, it's not over. Either we continue to pay these wages, or these soldiers won't work for the Karzai or whoever wins the next election, the civil government that we put in place. So then we've completely wasted our time. Why are we there for this next 2 years if it isn't a transitional period where we plan to instill in these people the, whatever it takes to protect themselves?
But General Allen has not made a commitment as to how many troops he thinks we should leave there when we pull out.
Yeah, and I think obviously that's one of the motivations for us being there in the first place, is to have a base in a very volatile area of the world where we can somewhat control what goes on, and be able to dictate to our partners in that area what's going to happen.
Partners, you're using that term loosely, are you not?
Yeah, I think Pakistan's far from a partner, and of course we know Iran's not.
Well, we can't trust our allies in that, our allies in that area.
Yeah, we can't. And really the allies that we have in ISAF, the Europeans, they're as fed up with the war as the Americans are. So the French losing 4 soldiers and having 14 more wounded a month ago is an example of why they pulled out.
Well, NATO just lost 4, I think it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Day before.
Yeah. And all killed by Afghan soldiers or Afghan policemen, who we've trained, who we've armed, so we're being shot by our own bullets. And we've trained the guys how to use the guns that shoot us.
That's a little scary, Chris.
Yeah, to me it makes it even less viable for us to even make this next 2-year hump where we're trying to do the transfer, because we're exposing ourselves. My biggest fear is being killed by an Afghan policeman.
Have you ever
living in a civil area like Kabul, where that's who protects me, that's my biggest fear.
Have you ever been stopped?
We're constantly stopped. I mean, there are roadblocks all over the city, so I'm stopped 3 or 4 times a day, and I always pray that it is the right people. And 2 years ago, I had to kill an Afghan policeman who tried to blow me up in an attack of my house. And it's very hard for Americans to shoot an authority figure. We're trained to
be nice.
Yeah. When a policeman stops us, we go, yes, sir. What do
but
you want?
that brings up kind of an interesting issue, and that is the process of thought is different in many areas of the world, and it's different in that area than it is in our home here in the United States.
It is.
And I think we don't quite comprehend that.
Well, and I don't know whether it's an unwillingness for the authorities in charge of that war to really educate their soldiers, but the burning of the Quran, even though it was professed to be an accident, I don't doubt it was an accident. But this is a sacred book that when in an Afghan home has to be higher than any other book, has to be on a shelf higher than any other book. So this is such a sacred thing to them that for us to disrespect it, that preacher in Florida, I mean, we lost lives after both of these actions. So we have to take very seriously their cultural beliefs.
Well, I think the Quran burning was probably a major, even more major than the Bales case. Don't you think so?
I believe it thoroughly. Those people are so hardened to human life being lost over the last 30 years that case, as barbaric and inhumane as that action was by that sergeant, doesn't impact us as much as the burning of the Quran.
I want to go back to Sergeant Bales, though. This war is much different than other wars, World War II and Vietnam. The soldiers did their duty, and in World War II it was 5 years. They were home. World War in Vietnam, they did a tour and then they were home, but we just keep sending them back and sending them back. And that's why, do you think that's an issue here? I mean, to me, this is a serious issue.
This is the longest war we've ever been in. And I think it's not a draft army, so we don't have an endless supply of bodies as we did in Vietnam. So I think inevitably you're going to attract people as a voluntary army, people that want to fight. You know, Bales volunteered after 9/11. So, you know, that's an indication that he went into the war to fight. He wanted to kill people. You know, so he's had that in his mind, and he's had his buddies killed. This again hardens you towards that. He's been severely damaged himself, lost part of his foot.
And he's been, this is his 4th tour.
His 4th tour of duty. But see, those are the guys that sign up to go back. You know, that's above and beyond. So that's not the Army forcing him to go back. That's him going, yeah, I want to go.
Well, the government has not been known for its drastic punishment in the My Lai massacre. Those people were not drastic, they weren't put to death.
You know, I think it goes back to what I said earlier. We have to terrorize these people if we're going to have any kind of control there. Now, we pay Blackwater to do it, or we pay people like the butcher Rahugala to do it, these subcontractors. So really, I think the cover-up that happened in Vietnam with that particular massacre is still going on today. You know, we don't, how can we justify giving a young boy a gun and saying, go in and kill these people? We're not giving him any clear concept of who these people are. These people are people he might have had tea with yesterday, yet they try to kill him today. As we're seeing, 4 soldiers were killed by people who they work with. These are people that are at their base. These are Afghan employed.
That they see every day.
They see every day. These are people that they might have had tea with, and then they turn around and kill them.
Well, and the other issue is that it seems to me that the actual lines of war are not really very well defined, and we're not always sure who the enemy is.
Yeah, we have no idea really, and we're not effectively. We're not really fighting a war to win, and I think that's a major issue. And I agree with the general public, and I think the statistics today said that 70% of the U.S. citizens want to get out of that war. I couldn't agree with you more. I think we need to get out. We need to get out immediately. This transition is just a way for these major military contractors to make more money.
Yeah, but Chris, from what you're saying, we're not really going to get out. It's going to cost us money. And I
oh
think,
no, we're not out.
And the explanation, I don't think, has been made clear to the American public, which, by the way, is not engaged in this war.
Yeah.
It has not been made clear to them why we should or should not still keep investing in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and especially since it's been a failure, and we're not changing our policies enough to make it a success.
And I guess the question I'd ask you, is it worth the investment to keep a base in Afghanistan?
Oh, again, you know, the military hawks are all going to say we have to watch Iran, we have to watch Pakistan, we can't let the militants get nuclear power, or we'll have a dirty bomb in New York that kills 8 million people. And that is a reality, and that may be very true. But I think we can do it covertly, as the CIA has always done. I don't think having the 140,000 troops that we had in that country was beneficial. Most of the dirty work is done by contractors, special forces people, the SEALs teams. They're the ones that are really terrorizing the locals. And the major bulk of the troops sit on base. They don't ever leave the wire. You know, they're working out at gyms or eating food. It cost the Army, I think, $50 a day to feed our soldiers. In fact, I was told by Congress—
$50
Yeah, I was told by Congress that the cost to keep one soldier, regardless of rank, in Afghanistan for a year is $1 million.
That's kind of pricey, Chris.
It is, and that's why contractors
why are they not fighting? Why are they sitting within
Well,
the line?
again, because there's no clear fight. There's really no way to direct them. You know, we do sneaky things at night. We do drone attacks. We do things like we did with bin Laden, with the SEALs. That's the only way we can really proceed. There isn't really a clear battle line.
In other words, those who are trained to fight and to kill are the ones who are doing the job.
Yes, the guys like Bale who have come back 4 times, you know, because that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be in the action. And you become an adrenaline junkie. You know, I've met these SEAL guys, these special forces guys, and to some degree I've lived the same life they have in being in a war zone for so many years. You get addicted to the adrenaline. You're never more alive except for that moment when you almost die.
But they have to come home.
They do, and they're not adjusted to come home. And I think I'm not adjusted. I think I suffer from some kind of mental effect. In fact, the UN said that Afghanistan being at war for 30 years has affected their population to tremendous degrees. As much as 60% of the people suffer from mental ailments caused by this.
Well, there's no peace, no quiet.
Sense of security. They've had
security.
They've had no way to develop their infrastructure. They've had no way to.
Speaking of trouble, let's move to the east and to the Pakistani border. That's a problem, Chris.
Yeah, it is. You know, and again, I think we have to look at this from a more historical point of view. That Pakistani border was created by the British in 1902, and it doesn't represent the tribal border. You know, the Pashtus who were fighting, that's the basis behind the Taliban's power. Mullah Omar is a Pashtu, Kandahar is their capital. Half of them live on the other side of that Durand line in Pakistan. So we're, you know, it's really difficult for us to appreciate the fact that we're fighting the Pakistani government too. You know, they on one side want our money, want to be our partners, and have profited greatly by being our partners. And on the other side, they're actively fighting us.
What's going to happen with our relationships with Pakistan as it relates to that whole area? What do you think?
It sounds kind of fatalistic, but I think if we pull out, and I mean seriously pull out, and not continue to support, even though we've brought our men back, financially support that area, it will somewhat lessen their effect because they won't have the funding. Because basically we're funding both sides. We're funding the Afghans that want to fight the Taliban, and we're funding the Taliban. So our presence
and we're not sure who's who.
And we don't know which is which. Exactly right. And there is a bleed between those two. They are both.
Well, and
Karzai said that every Pashtu family has a Taliban. Every Pashtu family. So that means that every family in that country is on the fence. They're both Pashtus, they're Taliban, they're collaborators with us.
Well, and I read someplace that it's a very different, everybody looks like everybody else. You can't pick them out.
No, again, it's a subtle thing, but I mean, I can see an individual and tell you which tribe he's from. You know,
Well,
there's some obvious differences in the tribes. The northern tribes.
In their facial features?
Yes, the northern tribes were influenced by Genghis Khan, the Oriental influence of the steppes of Asia. The southern ones are more Aryan-looking. In fact, Hitler said that the Pashtus were the beginning of the Aryan race.
Well, some of them are blonde with blue eyes.
They are. There are redheads.
And who got in there?
Oh, there's a lot of speculation. Alexander the Great was a big influence there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So he may have left some.
He did leave. He did. A lot of his 300,000 strong force stayed there. Exactly.
Yeah. To me, it is such a mess, Chris. I think the American public looks at it and they think, what?
Yeah. Well, I want to reiterate that we need to get out. And I think the more the American public gets behind that issue and forces the U.S. government to quit funding a failed operation, the better.
You know what I find interesting, too, is that more and more, not just this administration, but other administrations too, the president has more power to take troops into war. And the public is not engaged in that kind. I mean, in World War II, everybody was patriotic. Everybody was engaged in that war, and Vietnam changed everything.
Yeah, it did. It did. And I think that the fact that Congress and politicians are heavily affected by big business. They are lobbied by big business. They are funded by big business. So these defense contractors, war is money. War creates an industry. Halliburton was making $1 billion a week at the height of the Iraqi war. Well, you don't think they have some influence with the president? You know they do.
Of course they do.
So,
of course they do.
Yeah. So
let's talk about the contractors. Talk a little bit about the kind of people that are contractors of different kinds, not government contractors, but people who contract for trucking, and that's dangerous work.
Well, and I think the main motivation for any American that's working over there is the financial gain. So I think as we fund this operation, we're feeding a lot of the contract work is actually done by Afghans. So it may be an American that has the contract, but it's Afghans that are working it. And again, in my experience, even the aid projects, I mean, as much as I would like to think that USAID is doing wonderful things in that country with their aid money, most of it is being stolen. Most of it is not being applied to the people that actually deserve it and need it. So in a sense, the whole thing is a theater. It's all a play, and we as Americans are unfortunately being duped into believing that we're doing some humanitarian good over there, when in reality we're making a lot of contractors very, very wealthy.
Very wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you talk about being afraid you're going to be shot, but collateral damage has become a way of life over there. Even, little boys get their legs blown up with landmines. And
yeah, the Afghans are very calloused towards that. I mean, they accept.
You become callous. I mean, that's a sad fact, but I think it's true.
And they have a way of closure. As we've done in this last massacre, they take blood money. And we've paid $50,000 to each of the families that were involved in the Bales case. So there is closure for them to some degree, because $50,000 is a lot of money in their culture.
It is, but
and 9 of those people were children, which, to me is a very sad thing. But the Afghans have, 10 kids, 15 kids. So we've maybe killed one, but in their eyes, we're maybe saving the other 10 by supplying them with
life is not as precious.
It isn't. It isn't.
As
it doesn't
it
have
is
the,
to us. Well, and it's to choose to believe it was not, it was determined and not a tragic mistake, nets them income.
Yes, nets them income. And you see them lined up at the major bases waiting for their payoff from drone attacks. I mean, we've been killing civilians there for, you know, I think the figure this year is 3,000 civilians been killed, and we're not responsible for all of them, but.
But you know, Chris, war is hell.
It is.
And collateral damage in war is really unavoidable. I mean, it's terribly difficult to pick and choose when everybody's in a group.
Yeah. You know, and I think we let's look at our own history. I mean, didn't Harry Truman kill 500,000 civilians in a week when he dropped 2 atomic bombs to end that war? You know, was that a humane thing to do?
No,
but it worked.
It worked.
Yeah. So at some point we have to make this compromise work. You know, we want to be humanitarians. We want to help people. We don't want to be barbarian in our actions. But yet, that's what it takes to win a war. Let's be realistic.
It does.
So we need to get out. If we're not willing to play by those rules, we don't really need to be there, just to enrich some private contractors.
How do they get all this money out? I mean, millions of dollars. They just carry it out in suitcases?
Yeah, but you know, the rate of corruption in the third world countries is so high that if you're caught at the airport with a bundle of money, all they want is a share of it. You know, and there are so many safe havens in that part of the world to launder your money, like Dubai, which is really, it's, you know, Dubai.
Well, you know,
people
Jordan is a very big banking center, too.
It is. And they think that these areas are, you know, thriving because of oil revenue. They're thriving because of a lot of dubious deals that are going on every day in the banking world.
Let's talk about, just a little bit about Iraq and Iran. We're still in Iraq. We're going to stay there?
I think we will. I think we've earned, you know, I think the military feel like they've earned the right to keep a permanent base there, as we have in Turkey since the Second World War. You know, so our involvement in that part in the Arab world is really critically hinges on our ability to have bases there, to have safe havens. Saudi Arabia, because we give them so much money and revenue from oil, that we have the permanent right to keep people there.
But I think we need to pull out that thread, because it has been and still is important to this country to have bases in these countries, which is part of the reason, a major part of the reason that we have become involved.
Exactly.
So,
and I think you're right. I think, you know, again, we make up a very small percentage of the world's population, and yet we control a lot of its...
Smaller all the time.
Yes, and we control a lot of its resources. And I think our ability to do that is because of our involvement in military affairs worldwide. I think that, you know, as Roosevelt said, carry a big stick. Well, we definitely do.
And we have to. We have to maintain our place.
If we want to keep the economics in our direction, yes.
Well, it's true. Let's talk about Iraq. Problem. What are we going to do there? I mean, they keep on chunking away at this nuclear development. What are we prepared to? What are we prepared to do?
You know, again, you know, and that's probably my biggest fear. The fanatical Muslim world is not going to hesitate a moment to kill 10 million people in downtown New York with a dirty bomb carried in a suitcase. So as we get closer to, and you know, if you know the Muslim faith, there are two sects, Shias and Sunnis. The Sunnis are majority of the Muslim world. Of the billion Muslims, 80% are Sunni. The Shia have always been a minority, and as we all know, the underdog has to fight a little harder.
Yes.
So martyrism has always been a very relevant part of their fight within their own religion. Their prophet, Ali, was butchered. His whole family was butchered by the Sunnis. So the Shias have always had to struggle.
And that butchering has cemented that rift in the two sects.
Oh, it has, and then they don't get along. You know, I think right now we're looking at problems with the Shias much more than the Sunnis. I know the oil wealth of the Middle East is to some degree controlled by the Sunnis, but yet the Shias have a majority of the population in Iraq, in Iran, in these countries that are oil-based countries. So we've propped up people like Hussein, you know, in Iraq, just to keep an influence and have the Sunnis have some control, even though it's a Shia majority country. So their disproportionate numbers in these oil-rich countries has affected us.
Well, are we sword rattling in Iraq, or are we prepared?
Oh, you know, again, I think Afghanistan points out the futility of any kind of, you know, our superiority in the air, our ability to drop bombs from a drone at 70,000 feet is our strength. On the ground, we're a paper army. You know, we just don't have we don't have the mentality, we don't have, you know, we're too humane. We're too convinced that we want to do right, And in a war, you can't. You know, you have to kill kids. You have to kill women. You know, you can't separate. Don't you think Truman was haunted by the fact that he killed so many women and children?
Yes.
Yet, you know, you have to do it. So we have to either get over that.
But he always said, I have to do what I think is right.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I really respect the man for having the good sense to see that he didn't have an option.
he didn't have an option.
And
That's right.
we've not taken that option in the last, think about the wars we've had since then, nobody's won.
No.
Korea we lost, Vietnam we lost. Yeah, I can't say we won in Iraq, I can't say we won in Afghanistan.
But we didn't learn much from the Russians and the French.
They all lost.
They all lost.
Yeah. So until you're willing to take those drastic steps that Truman took, and as a nation you have to do that. You know, you can't do it as an individual.
I'm not sure we're ready yet.
No, I know we're not ready. So we need to get out. Again, I think it's been a futile effort on our part, and I think pretending that we can prop up this, you know, we hired Karzai as president. He wasn't really elected. We wanted somebody we could talk to. He spoke English. The true leader should have been someone who never left that country, who stayed there and endured 30 years of civil war and civil strife. Those were the true heroes of that country.
But that is a true weakness that we have.
Yeah.
We don't have multilingual speakers.
Especially people that are decision makers.
Yes.
We've got translators. And
Well, you can speak Pashtun, but they're not asking you what you think on a daily basis.
Oh, you know, they do. They don't act on what I say.
But it's true. We need to teach languages, and we need, you know, we are not just citizens of this country anymore. We're world citizens, and the world is getting smaller, and we are becoming more dependent on one another. Don't you think so?
Oh, I think the globalization of the world's economy at least has been well shown, and we cannot ignore our, you know, we used to manufacture at least our own goods.
Not anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
It is really tough to find something that's manufactured in the United States,
really
much to my irritation.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
But the rest of the world is willing to work for $2 a day, and we're not.
No.
So, you know, as we become, you know, greedier and greedier, we want more things, you know, and I think that's, our materialism is somewhat of our downfall.
Well, and you know, you pay a big price for war in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that the American public is of the mindset to pay that price anymore.
Yeah. Well, as you so aptly said it, though, they've taken that decision out of the Americans' hands.
They have. They have. And I think that's an issue that is really important because, and as a fallout, the American public is not engaged.
Yeah. Because they feel they have no power.
They have no power. That's right. And I don't know. Well, we don't know, Chris, what's going to happen in Afghanistan. Are you going to go back?
You know, I've always enjoyed going back. I've always felt like I was doing something positive. I always felt like I was helping. I have less and less of those feelings. I'm more paranoid about my involvement with the Afghan military, which I've been in, you know, they convoy our goods. They help us a lot in getting the supplies places. And I have less and less faith in the system. So I'm
Less trust.
Less trust, for
Less
sure.
trust.
And I've always trusted those people. It saddens me to be in that position.
Yeah, you know, when your gut twitches, you better listen. I don't know. It makes me nervous to have you say that because
Well.
I've never. Chris is my neighbor, and I have never heard you say that you were stressed or afraid to go back or thinking that you couldn't trust the people
Well, you
that
know,
you lived among.
the change in the attitude on part of the Afghans since 2001 when we first came has been night and day. And I'm sad to say that our actions have caused that change in opinion. It's not the Taliban's effort, because the Taliban's killing civilians too. It's our actions, our lack of involvement with the Afghan people, our cultural indifference to their way of life has caused this bitterness that's festering. And it gives the Afghan Taliban much more strength.
Gives them ammunition too.
It does.
And as I say, thank you so much to Chris Turner. We're just all delighted that you have come back, and we want you to be safe and do whatever it takes, Chris.
Thank you.
But I think that we need to. We've learned something from you this morning, and I think that we are one world, and we have to begin to understand, I think, the neighbors that we have not only in Johnson County and not only in Kansas, but in the whole world. And war is not a pretty thing. So maybe we can live. You know, the First World War was supposed to be the last great war, and we have all lived to see that that is not the case. So maybe there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well,
Thanks,
thank
Chris.
you, Mary. Thank you, and I appreciate your involvement in these issues. And not a lot of people have the strength and fortitude that you do to ask the hard questions. Thank you
Thank you,
very
Chris.
much.
thank you for being with us, and I hope you've enjoyed It's Our Community.